What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Matt Chat. My name is Kyle, and today I'm going to be ranking every player from Survivor 48. I know this is super late and everybody's already moved on to 50 and nobody gives a damn about this season anymore, but hey, I'm still going to talk about it. This is probably the hardest ranking I've done yet. There were a lot of flawed players, but also a lot of luck that came into the game, or rather bad luck, I should say. But I did my best. I have a list that I feel pretty good about. So, with that, let's start at number 18, someone who made it somewhat further in the game, and that is Charity. Charity has gotten a lot of heat from the fans this season, so I don't want to dogpile on her too much, but Charity was a very bad player. She did make a tight ally in Mitch, but everyone on this season made at least one tight ally, so I can't even use that as something to prop her up above anybody. Charity was delusional about her place in the tribe and who she was working with. She was on the outs pretty much right away and never recovered. She underestimated David, who took advantage of that and turned everyone against her at the swap. And then she was the landslide target at Murgatory, the first tribal council she goes to, in one of the most obvious boots we've had in a long time. So overall, nothing positive to say about Charity's game. She's in last place. Now, number 17, going back to the first boot of the season, I have Stephanie. I don't think Stephanie is the worst first boot in the world, but she clearly was lacking as a player. She intentionally did not play actively, which I don't think is an optimal strategy for the new era. There are very few places to hide, so I think you really do need to be proactive in making alliances. But despite that, Say came to Stephanie wanting to work with her, and she turned it down, which is a huge mistake. You always say yes to an alliance on day one. She made a great bond with Mary, who fought for her to stay, but they didn't do a good enough job convincing the likes of Kevin to vote with them. But I don't think Stephanie did much actively wrong, so she avoids last place. Alright, at number 16, we're jumping way ahead here to someone who made it pretty deep, but their game was very lackluster, and that is Star. I loved Star as a character, but I don't have a lot of positive to say about her game. She was on the outs of Logie immediately, but to her credit, she did try to make a lot of relationships. She recruited Joe and Shaheen to help her with the Beware advantage, and she tried to make a trio with Thomas and Bianca to target Eva, although I doubt that would have actually happened. She made good with Eva at the swap, even giving her idol to Eva, but she didn't leverage that to improve her standing in the game. It just kind of turned out to be a waste. We didn't see a lot of her at the merge. She was in the majority, kind of, but way at the bottom of it. She went after Mitch at the final 9, which was just kind of bizarre, and lost Mitch's trust, losing him as a number for her to make a move at the final 8. And then she's voted out there for being untrustworthy, which is honestly understandable. She threw out Mitch's name, Joe's name. I think she even mentioned Shaheen's name at one point. So Star didn't do herself any favors throughout the game and didn't do anything for me to put her any higher than this. Next at number 15, I have Kevin. Kevin's game was rocky from the start. He injured his shoulder at the first challenge and apparently passed out off camera. He went on the initial journey, which harmed his standing in the tribe. But despite that, he was included in the majority with Say and the boys, but I would say that was more so due to Stephanie and Mary turning it down. I quibble with his decision to vote out Stephanie at the first tribal, but it's not a glaring issue. He made a great bond with Mary and tried to pull her in as a number, and Kevin seemingly was in a great spot on Vula. His biggest problem was that he wasn't as close to Cedric or Justin as they were to each other, or to Say, so when he approached them to vote out Say, they flipped the vote on him at the last minute. So yeah, Kevin got himself voted out, but I do think he went out trying to make the optimal move, so I'll give him some credit for that. And who knows, his injured shoulder may have been a bigger factor than we saw, too. So I think all that was enough to put Kevin up here at number 15. Coming in at number 14 is one of the most polarizing players we've had lately, and that is Say. Say came out hot from the start, trying to make alliances with everybody. And she succeeded at that. She created a core that was ultimately loyal to her. Cedric and Justin looked out for her. Cedric in particular went out of his way multiple times to save her. One of Say's issues was that she made it very clear who she liked and who she didn't, and it created many enemies along the way, causing her to receive at least one vote at every tribal she went to. She did an amazing job at convincing Cedric to keep her at the Justin boot, and obviously some bad luck that went into that to even put her in that spot to begin with. She then threw Cedric's name out at the swap when they absolutely should have worked together, and most people wanted her out. She only stayed due to a last minute mistake by Bianca. And after that, I mean, she's the split vote at Murgatory and then was voted out unanimously at the split tribal. Nobody wanted to work with her or even have her on the jury. And there were so many little things about her game, too, like being mad at Cedric for telling her to play her idol when she could have just not played her idol. Or when she was like, I told you guys when Mary's shot in the dark hit. Like, there was a 1 out of 6 chance that was going to happen. What point are you trying to make? She also voted for Cedric at Murgatory for pretty much no reason when she could have been building trust instead. So overall, not a great game, but she did go to so many tribals early on, which most players don't have to go through. Next up at number 13, we have Say's arch nemesis, Mary. Mary's game was very up and down. She was at the bottom of Vula the entire time and was on the wrong side of both of the first 2 votes. To her credit, she made tight bonds with half the tribe. Both Stephanie and Kevin were loyal to her. The problem was that it wasn't at the same time. She needed to get tight with them at the first vote to make something happen. Instead, she only really bonded with Kevin only after Stephanie went home. She did survive over Kevin, though not really due to anything that she did. She got extremely lucky that her shot in the dark hit. She should have been gone there. She also spent that whole day trying to flip the vote and make people think she had an idol, which was just entirely ineffective. But then we get to the good part of her game. She linked up with David and Eva at the swap, giving her good inlines to the majority at the merge. So good, in fact, that she was brought into the strong alliance over the likes of Mitch and Star. Unfortunately, though, this put a huge target on her and David's backs. She was once again on the wrong side of the vote there. And then she was at the mercy of the majority, and she finally got voted out. Really crashed and burned when the writing was on the wall. Mary was never able to organize a plan that went through. All of her allies went home. She had no real control at all, and her social and strategic skills are pretty much big question marks. So all of that lands Mary here at number 13. Next up at number 12, going back to the pre-merge, I have Bianca. Bianca wasn't in the greatest spot on Logi, but probably wasn't going to be targeted unless they lost twice, which was unlikely. She was aligned with Thomas, of course, and also to Star, who came up to her to vote out Eva. Bianca was forced to go on and play the journey in episode 3, where she lost her vote, and at the swap, instead of being the swing vote between 2 duos, she was kind of a sitting duck and couldn't play the way she wanted to. But granted, Siva was coming after the Loggies hard, so her position was tenuous at best either way. She told Cedric about her lost vote at the worst possible time, in my opinion. Either tell him way before, or don't tell him at all. Telling him right before Tribal was a mistake, I think, and that's what got her voted out. But I do give Bianca a bump because she did get unlucky with the journey, but also unlucky at the swap. She was the only Loggy on her tribe in a spot where her tribe was the biggest target in the game. So either way I look at it, I think Bianca got pretty unlucky. Now, she obviously still had chances to save herself with her social game and didn't, which is why she's not higher than this, but I think Bianca had a lot more potential and lost due to some pretty unfortunate circumstances. Coming in at number 11, I have Thomas. Thomas started off the game in a great spot on Logi. He had the California girls, he had Bianca, and he had Star coming to him to strategize. I don't think he had the most control of everyone on the tribe, but nevertheless, he wasn't in any danger. He showed his hand too much when he told Shaheen to throw away the Beware advantage, revealing that he was a bit of a sneaky player. He didn't tell his tribe that he got to steal a vote from the journey, which I think was a mistake. He was in such a good spot that I don't think telling that to people was going to put a target on his back. And not only that, but he was hesitant to use it at the swap because he hadn't told anybody about it yet. What's the point of hiding it if you're going to be too scared to play it because you didn't tell anybody? I don't really understand that. And he was ultimately voted out at the swap because Kyle and Camilla knew that he went on a journey and likely had something. But I can't fault him too much for his vote out, though he was in the majority and got unlucky that the person they voted for was the one person from Siva with the idol. But my hesitation with Thomas was that he was already emitting overly strategic vibes. I think he would have been targeted in the early merge anyway if he had made it there, and his game was certainly not void of error, so I have him at number 11. Starting off the top 10, we are still not done with the pre-merge, and here I have Justin. Justin is one of the unluckiest players of all time. There is no other way to say it. He was in the core of Vula, he was in a duo with Cedric, and they were the main decision makers of the tribe. I like the move to take out Kevin. It kept Justin in the center of everything, ensuring he would be in a 3-1 scenario rather than risking a 2 versus 2 against Mary and Kevin. He got very unlucky with the journey. He did not ask to go on it, he did not ask to play it, and then got further screwed over by losing. Now, I do think he should have told Cedric about losing his vote so they could have made a plan, but none of this should have even mattered, because why would you expect Mary's shot in the dark to hit? I know it's optimal to account for every possibility, but sometimes you just need to play the odds, and so I have a hard time blaming Justin for any of this. And even then, Justin was still an inch away from staying. Cedric voted for Say twice and still inexplicably kept her around. Justin apparently fought harder at that tribal than we saw. Apparently that tribal was hours long. He does obviously end up losing to Say there, but there was just way too many things out of Justin's control that put him in that spot, and he played well outside of that, so he's here at number 10. Coming in at number 9 is Chrissy. Chrissy is a tough player to rank because we saw so little of her game. She was included in the initial majority of Siva. She seemed like a likable social presence. She put aside her differences with Mitch at the swap to keep Siva strong, and they kind of forced the rest of the tribe to scramble amongst themselves. They gave no indication that they weren't tight, so that was good play from Chrissy. She was also able to put her emotions aside and vote with Cedric to blindside Bianca. She did not get along with Say at all and could have made a different decision if she let her annoyance get the best of her, but she didn't. Also good on her that Cedric felt comfortable coming to her to make that move. At the merge, Chrissy faded into the background until her speech at the split tribal, where she basically says she's coming after all the strong people. I have no idea why she did that, and obviously they have put the target square on her back at the next vote. Ultimately, Chrissy was just simply unconnected and outplayed. She didn't leverage any of the relationships she made throughout the game, called people out at tribal, but I was impressed with her at the swap, so she's here at number 9. Now at number 8 is someone who I think received a little too much blame, but the fact of the matter is they still didn't play a very strong game, and that is Mitch. Mitch started off the game poorly. He was on the outs with Charity right away. He won a block of vote at the journey, then told his entire tribe about it, and they still talked about how they couldn't trust him. I liked Mitch's active work to recruit Kyle and David to work with him in Charity. It was just a little too late, and it didn't work, but at least it's something. He also made a great bond with Cedric at the swap and kept Chrissy Siva strong. He was out of the loop at the Bianca vote, but that plan was so last minute that I don't really hold it against him, although I do wonder why Cedric went to Chrissy and not to Mitch. At the merge, Mitch was the only person to vote with Charity. Really bad there, but he does rebound well. He makes real connections with Joe and Shaheen. He really tried to reintegrate himself, and it was effective. He survived over Say, despite the fact that everyone was talking about how much of a threat he was. However, from this point on, Mitch's game is very underwhelming. He was targeted by Star, David, and Mary at the final 9 when he should have been someone they were trying to work with. He didn't make a move at the final 8, which I can't blame him for. Star had been coming after him. But at the same time, he just kind of allowed himself to be strung along until his eventual vote off. He assumed Kyle and Camilla would vote with him to take out Joe, when he didn't realize that Kyle and Joe basically had an unbreakable bond. Mitch got outplayed in the social department there. To his credit, it seemed like he had more win equity than we as the audience thought. This was a relatively bitter jury, so I definitely could have seen him getting votes if he had made it to the end. But ultimately, Mitch never used his social connections to his advantage. He was in an impossible spot of being at the bottom of the majority while also being targeted by the minority, and it resulted in a very mediocre game. So he's here at number 8. Now at number 7, going back a bit, I have Cedric. Cedric got so much heat this season for some of his decision making, and while I don't agree with some of the things he did, he had so much control, which is more than what you can say for everybody below him here. He was both Justin and Say's number one, putting him in the best position on Vula. I didn't like the move to take out Kevin at the time, but I was wrong, as it kept Cedric in the middle. The next vote was pretty wacky, so it's hard for me to glean much from it, but it was a crazy move to vote for Say twice and then keep her for seemingly emotional reasons. I think Cedric knew deep down that the correct strategic move was to keep Justin, and he didn't. So that's an obvious flaw, but again, the fact that he was in such a good position to where he was able to make those kinds of decisions is impressive enough to me. At the swap, he made a great bond with Mitch that kept his name off the table, despite Say's attempts to throw him under the bus. Bianca clearly trusted him the most, because she chose to tell him, of all people, about her lost vote, and then he worked with Chrissy to vote her out. Cedric was in such control of that tribe, and nobody really gave him any credit for it. Do I think he always made the best decisions? No, but it's better than everyone else we've talked about. He left Say out of the vote again, which she tried to use against him, but honestly, she was kind of a lost cause at that point for Cedric. He wasn't able to break his way into the majority, but he was swapped with Mitch, Chrissy, and Say. He didn't necessarily have the best hookups to be in the majority, now did he? So for all of this, Cedric is at number 7. Coming in at number 6, one of the more polarizing players of the season, I have David. David started off the game great. He was in all of the alliances on Siva and showed a soft side that allowed him to connect personally with people. He was underestimated by Charity in particular, and he used that to his advantage. He hooked up with Mary and Eva at the swap and turned everyone against her heading into Murgatory. That was more of a consensus vote, but I give David more of the credit for it. Unsurprisingly, David aligned with Joe at the merge, and they made a strong person alliance, which dominated the early merge. David was the main force behind the Cedric vote, despite Kyle and Camilla's attempts to flip it, so that's another move that I give David credit for. It was around this point, though, that David became overbearing and paranoid. He brought Mary into the alliance with no consultation, and he just couldn't sit still. I think targeting Camilla was actually a great move for his game, he just went about it the wrong way. Kyle capitalized on David's social mistakes and outplayed him, and David started to unravel. He fought with Chrissy on her way out, which was a bad look not only to the jury, but also to the other people in the game. Camilla laughed at him, and he pushed Joe and Eva away. He lost his ability to appeal to people, and ended up turning them against him by the end of it. But with that, David did play a great social game, at least in the first half, and had a lot of control. It had some great reads on the game, too, so that's good enough to put him at number 6. Okay, now we're in the top 5, and this next choice probably isn't going to make me very popular, but I have my reasons for it. So at number 5, I do have Camilla. And Camilla is a case of someone with a great strategic mind who had absolutely no control in the game. We saw her establish a connection with Kyle very early on, bonding both personally and strategically. She was in the initial majority and won an extra vote from the journey. Perhaps the best round of Camilla's gameplay comes at the swap, where she and Kyle were at a 3-2 disadvantage. She kept the target off of her and got the California girls to trust her, so she knew the plan and kept her alliance with Kyle secret. The only qualm I have is that they played the extra vote when they didn't have to. Maybe it was to combat if the other side had an extra vote too. After that, Camilla solidified an alliance with Kyle, Joe, and Shaheen, which I thought was going to be the power alliance heading into the merge, which the guys ended up being in the power, while Camilla was kind of needed Kyle's help to make it through the game. She wasn't a part of that, really. She was still playing actively, but she didn't have the power to save herself. She needed Kyle's influence within the majority in order to accomplish that. She also tried to vote out Shaheen at the split tribal, which was a curious move. Because like I just said, I thought they were supposed to be super tight coming to the merge. But on the other hand, I think I get Camilla's strategy. Break apart the strong guys, keep Cedric, and likely make a coalition along with Chrissy, Mitch, Star, etc. The problem was that was never going to happen. None of those people were ever on the same page, rendering Camilla's game plan ineffective. And again, this is me just assuming that was her strategy. She wanted to make a move against Joe's alliance, but to me, would seemingly back out before it was time to vote. Like she wanted to work with Mary, but then didn't trust Mary after she threw Kyle's name out. It perplexed me that it bothered Camilla so much, the whole point was to keep their alliance a secret. I understand being protective of your ally, but you're not meant to be protective as far as the other players in the game are concerned, you know what I mean? Camilla makes another big move at the final 6 to finally take out Shaheen. I give Kyle the credit for the idea, but Camilla gets a lot of credit for the execution. I question her move to take out Mitch at the final 5. I know she likely would have beaten everyone at the end anyway, but Mitch was probably the only person who I thought had a chance to take her to the end. None of the other 3 people would have done that, so I think that was maybe a misstep. And that's the main flaw with Camilla's game. She was left with no real path to the end. As a big jury threat as she was, and we know that she would have gotten all the votes, she would have won in a landslide had she gotten there, she had almost no avenues to actually get there. I do think Camilla could do very well with a different cast. We'll see how she does on season 50, but for this season, she's at number 5 for me. Okay, moving on to number 4, I have someone where my opinion has gone up on them a little bit after some thought, and that is Shaheen. Shaheen was very well positioned on the original Logie tribe. He had the California girls, he had a bond with Star over the Beware advantage. He remained in the majority at the swap, but got outplayed by Kyle and Camilla, and really came off looking super unaware and overconfident that whole episode. He was also on the radar for being sketchy and strategic, and probably would have went home there had it not been for the fear of Thomas having an advantage. But he rebounded well, forming a group with Kyle, Camilla, and Joe. He was included in the strong alliance at the merge, and formed one-on-one bonds with almost everyone. He was set up as a target at the split tribal. Kyle and Camilla really put in some work to get him out there. His name was also mentioned by the likes of Chrissy and Star, so Shaheen was on a lot of people's radars, but the majority alliance stayed strong and kept him. And that is a big credit to Shaheen. For as sketchy or strategic as they may have thought he was, he sure turned that reputation around in a hurry and gained a lot of people's trust. That's not easy to do, and often goes unreported, so I want to make sure that I give Shaheen his credit for that. He then put in a lot of work to target David, so I give him a lot of credit for that move, although I do question if that was the best move for him. David was definitely loyal to him, and was a big reason why he stayed at the split tribal over Cedric, so going after David as soon as he did confused me a bit. But he did manage to help turn Joe and Eva against David, so that was some impressive social work there. And from there, he stayed strong in the majority until he got outplayed by Kyle and Camilla. He seemed to think that something was up and then just didn't do much about it. He didn't really try to bring Joe back to reason. It seemed like he just let his fate come to him. One thing I loved about Shaheen's game was that he didn't take out Joe, despite everyone telling him to do so. When he said he thought he could have beat Joe and Eve at the end, I thought he was crazy, but I was totally wrong. Based on what we know now that Joe and Eva both got to the end and lost, I think it's very likely that Shaheen wins against them, especially if he was perceived as the brains of the operation like Kyle called him. So I think Shaheen was a good player. He just got by the end of it, but he played a really solid game overall. Alright, the top 3 on this list are the final 3. It's just a question of what order. And at number 3, we're starting it off with Eva. I feel like I could repeat myself a lot talking about Eva and Joe's games here, so I'll do my best to not do so, but their games were quite similar. Eva got off to kind of a rocky start. She had her unbreakable bond with Joe, of course, but she was targeted by Star, and who knows what Bianca and Thomas would have considered doing if Logie actually went to Tribal. At the swap, she made good connections with David and Mary, solved the Beware advantage, and bonded with Star to the point where Star gave her the idol. This was the only time in the game we saw Eva play without Joe, and it was nothing short of impressive. She's in the strong alliance at the merge, and helped dominate the game from there. She was an advantage magnet, and she never seemed like she was in any danger at any point. Now, I thought people didn't target her and wanted to go to the end with her because she would have been an easy beat, but that wasn't the case. While she did lose, yes, she got 2 votes, which is more than I expected. She got more votes than Joe, who was talked up as the biggest threat all season long, so that's something to credit her for. Her social game was pretty good as well. She got taken on nearly every reward. People seemed to like her a lot. And she had a good head for the strategy. Kyle and Joe have both said that Eva was the one crunching the numbers for their alliance. Having said that, though, I do think the David and Shaheen votes were a little iffy. I'm not saying they were bad moves, but the David vote I think was premature, and the Shaheen vote was for the wrong motives. Now, the reason why I have Eva below Joe is because I think Joe helped her more throughout the game than the other way around, but it was pretty close between the two. And with that, let's move on to my number 2, which is Joe. And as I said, Joe's game was very similar to Eva's, just a step above in my opinion. Joe was probably in the strongest position on Logi. He was with the guys, he had Eva, and Star came to him first when she found the Beware advantage. I also think Joe had the most influence in the tribe. If it came down to voting for Eva or Bianca, I think Joe would have gotten his way and been able to keep Eva. He was in the least amount of danger at the swap. Whatever he did to make Kyle and Camilla not even consider voting for him at all was good work, and then he made an alliance with them following that. Joe's position got even better at the merge when he met David, and they solidified the strong person alliance. Joe remained a dominant force in the majority for pretty much the entire merge. He certainly wasn't always the one coming up with the plans. I'd say Kyle, Eva, and Shaheen did more of that than Joe did, but nevertheless, Joe's influence was a big part of those moves being made. No one was going to make a move against him or make a move without his approval. And that's the best part of Joe's game. He was the connecting piece between so many people. Eva and Shaheen were really only aligned because of Joe. Same thing for Eva and Kyle. Joe was the figurehead of the alliance and the person that everybody came to for approval. He got his way at pretty much every single vote, and even some of the moves that weren't so good for his game, he was still the one calling those shots. His game revolved around honesty and loyalty, and to his credit, he mostly played that way. He was very straightforward with people. He wouldn't really interact with people he wasn't working with, but he didn't own up to it when he did betray people. If he had come into Final Tribal and said, Shaheen, you would have beat me at the end, so I had to get you out, and David, you were right, I did go back on my word, but you were too big of a threat. If he had said that, maybe he walks out of there a winner. But he made those moves against his own interest and just seemed to hope that his loyal game would get him the win. But that's not enough nowadays in Survivor. I am interested to see how he plays Season 50 without Eva there. I do think that we could see a very, very different game. But he still played a good game on this season relative to the competition, which is good enough for number 2. Finally, at number 1, and number 1 by a lot. This may be the widest gap between any 1 and 2 in any of the rankings that I've done so far. And here I have Kyle, the winner of the season. Kyle was my preseason winner pick. I finally got one right. And he did pretty much what I thought he would do. Play a steady social game and just win because he was more respected than the people sitting next to him. Kyle went on the journey in the first episode to get his tribe supplies, but came back with nothing, which can sometimes get people in trouble. But Kyle was fine. Now, we did see Charity mention his name, and Mitch has said after the fact that Kyle would have gone home first, likely, if Siva went to Tribal Council, but I just don't believe that. Kyle was in the middle of everything. He was in the majority, he had tight connections with Camilla and David, and then Mitch eventually came to him to work together. If Siva ever did go to Tribal, Kyle would have been the one making the final decision. The biggest knock on Kyle's game comes at the swap, when he needed an idol to survive. But I don't fault him too much for that. He was at a 3-2 disadvantage, and I suspect he would have played that round differently if he knew he didn't have an idol to protect him. Maybe he would have thrown Camilla under the bus or something. And considering how his relationships with Joe and Shaheen turned out later in the game, I suspect he could have survived with an idol if he needed to. At the merge, he reconnected with David and became a part of the Strong Person Alliance. He tried to vote out Shaheen at the swap, which I've said I don't really like, but he was very effective at pushing the Chrissy vote and keeping Camilla around, and that was massive for his game. He's then able to break apart Joe and David, and really become Joe's most trusted ally besides Eva. He was still working with Camilla on the side, but he had all the options available to him. Star, Mary, Mitch, they all came to Kyle and needed his number to make any kind of flip happen, so Kyle was in the most flexible spot of anyone in the game. He struck again at the final 6 when he pitted Joe and Shaheen against each other, another very impressive move that he was able to claim at Final Tribal. And he also demonstrated a killer instinct, throwing Camilla into fire making, knowing she wasn't going to win. Now, Kyle's game is not perfect, of course. I do think he led with his emotions a little too much deeper into the game. He refused to vote off Joe, and in all fairness, he did beat Joe at the end. And if he had a confessional saying, I'm not voting off Joe because I know I can beat him at the end, then I would feel differently. But instead, he kept saying that he just couldn't bring himself to vote out Joe, which I think is the wrong reasoning. But that's kind of a minor thing. He's still far and away the best player of Survivor 48. And there you have it. Those are my player rankings for Survivor 48. It was kind of weird to say my own name so many times, but I hope you enjoyed. Like and subscribe if you want, and I'll see you next time.